Good day, everyone. So, for today, we are going to talk about the chapter 7, which talks about the planning the test. So, for today, we are going to talk about the test in the educational field. And as we know, that testing is an important part of the teaching learning process, of course, because it helps us to assess our students' learning in terms of aptitude, intellect, and achievement tests and to identify their areas of improvement and their lacking in terms of their capabilities. And we could also provide our students with feedbacks, which will certainly um, lead them to improvements. And this can also lead for the parents to have initiatives to supplement their students' learnings. And as an educator, we needed to make sure that the test is always aligned with the curriculum. Kumbaga, the learning objectives is equals to the learning outcomes. And that is why we use a variety of test items formats to assess the different types of learning. First is to write the clear and concise items that will avoid ambiguity for the students. And we needed to review the test results and use them to inform for instruction. So there goes the importance of retesting after rediscussing to really supplement the the learning difficulties of the learners. And this topic will be specified are the topic that will be specified are the overall test development process, identifying purpose of test, specifying the learning outcomes, and to prepare test blueprint and other forms of test. It is clear and dear that assessment really plays a vital role in the teacher and the student's life, and that is invigorated to us educators since day one as we enter this track or this field, because it could be proofs for the teachers' progressive strategies and methods and their overall development of the learners, which can be reliable guides for the in the long run and for the administrators and the program conductors to see if their programs were sufficient, reliable, and are applicable. And these assessments can be proofs of the strengths of the students, which will lead to motivate or either demotivate them. It just depends on the teacher and how he or she will deliver those words of wisdoms out of the test results being taken by the student. And it could be a good evidence to show for the parents in order for them to know and what grounds could they help to supplement their their children's learning capabilities, and to also diagnose and whatever this when in whatever difficulties or differences their children have. So we have the summative assessment, the placement assessment, the formative assessment, and the interim assessment, which really plays a vital role in terms of testing, because summative assessments, it could conclude the learning of the curriculum out of the instruction, and its main goal is to measure the validity and not just the reliability of test. And that is the very purpose of this chapter number 7. So, first is specifying the purpose of test from the outset to identify the essential learning outcomes to be measured, preparing test blueprint to guide the construction of items, and the test blueprint is the content to be covered and the amount of emphasis allocated in each content area and other important features of the table of specification. So our intended learning outcome for chapter number 7, or the ILO, is to prepare a table of specification for classroom tests, which will be done with the use of our guides as we discuss the different types of identifying the test, specifying the test, preparing test blueprints, together with the different tables of specification.
So, good day, everyone. Now, I will be discussing to you the overview or the overall test development process or its steps. Or in other words, I will be first explaining and presenting to you the summary of this topic briefly. So, the process of task construction for classroom testing applies the same initial steps in the construction of any instrument designed to measure a psychological contract. So, in the process of formulating test items, we must undergo to a step-by-step process to make sure that our assessment is valid and reliable. We must be following the rules while constructing test items so that it can properly measure the psychological construct, or in other words, the level it can we can measure the level of learnings of our students. So the first initial step in the overall test development process is the planning phase. So here, where purpose of the test is identified, meaning to say, we will be identifying what specific purpose will your test aims. Is it to recall topics or review? Or is it to measure the level of learning that your students have? Or is it to check if your students are following the topics? So these are some of the purposes that you might include in the planning phase. Then, learning outcomes to be assessed are clearly specified. For you to assess the learner's need, you must have you must have to specify or to know the specific learning outcomes. And then after that is lastly a table of specifications is prepared to guide for which is will serve as a guide for the item construction. You might maybe you might ask about the table of specifications, but don't worry, because after the discussion, you will about to understand or get to know about this concept. And the next step in overall test development process is the item construction phase. So what is the content in the item construction phase? So here, where test items are constructed following the appropriate item format for the specified learning outcomes. Of course, in the construction of test items, the teachers has to follow the appropriate guidelines or item format. It could be identification, or it could be multiple choice, subjective, or objective, and many more to mention. Then, proceeding to the last of our old test development process is the letter C, the review phase, in which or where items are examined by teacher or his or her peers prior to the administration based judgment of their alignment to content and behavior components of the instructional competencies, and after administration based on an analysis of students' performance of each item. Um, Here, before concluding your task, make sure that it is first examined or assessed so that if there are some mistakes, you can have a chance to make revisions, because it is important that in formulating tests, um, formulating tests, it should be valid and reliable, and of course free from error. Review phase is as important of the other steps. So those are the so let us always remember these steps, especially the review phase. So those are the initial steps in task development. First is the planning phase, followed by the item construction phase, and ended with review phase. And after my report, Ms. Kapin will further explain this important test development process for classroom tests. Thank you.
So now we are down to identifying the purpose of the test. So testing is an assessment mechanism that aims to gather valid and reliable information useful to both learners and teachers for formative as well as summative purposes. So what do we mean when we say formative and summative purposes? Formative is to provide proper feedbacking to the learners during instruction in order to invigorate them with strategies that will modify their erroneous behaviors or their erroneous methods. And as per the the summative purpose is to map up the results which will conclude on whether to pass or not to pass in terms of that certain instruction or in terms of that certain testing. So testing is a vital role to identify the validity and reliability of the assessment used by the teacher and to be used as a useful information for both summative and formative purposes. So feedback is used to address the student's problem. And with that, the construction of items for testing will be drafted easier because we will base it on their level of difficulty, and at the same time the decision will be made for rediscussing the topic and at the same time retesting. And once you have considered these factors, we can now conclude or identify the purpose of the test. So, for example, the test is designed for students and it covers a specific subject matter, and such as math, English, Filipino, or science. And then the purpose of the test is likely to assess the student knowledge of that certain subject or on specific grounds. So the test is designed for the test will be designed to identify whether what confusions or what mastery did the student had acquired on that specific subject, and then there will be one specific method of assessment that will be used, which will lead to an easier way of diagnosing in of whatever difficulties the student is trying to suffer. So, similarly, if the test is designed for job applicants and covers specific skills, such as the computer, in electricity, electronics, and programming and computer engineering, then the purpose of the test is likely to assess the applicant's skills. So this was discussed by the other reporters. I think, if I am not mistaken, it is the sociosemiotic, or the testing of skills in different areas. And as we dig into different types of testing, the formative and summative test plays a really vital role in teaching and learning. So those sociomiotics can actually lead to promotions, to gaining certificates and different recognitions. And now, in order for us to really assess the students, we have one famous or very known assessment which can be used to easier plot or to easier see in whatever difficulties the student is being implied. So the multiple choice, it is the multiple choice, and it is a useful mechanism to diagnose confusions and difficulties. So multiple choice questions there. Multiple choice questions are one of the most common types of assessments being used either in educational or in any field. So, here's a very simple illustration of a multiple choice item with the structure selected to represent possible errors of the students. The structures are what we also so called the alternatives. So, multiple choice questions, they are popular because they're easy to write and they're easy to score. So it is an advantage, both an advantage for the teacher and the learner. And they can also really assess a wide range of knowledge and skills. So as for the efficiency of this multiple choice questions, it is relatively easy to write and easy to score. And as per its versatility, it can be used to, once again, assess a wide range of skills, a wide range of knowledge. No, so higher level thinking skills. And as per the reliability, it can provide us with consistency out of the scores, which is easy to plot and easy to discover. And as per objectivity, it could really vent us with fairness and less biases and comprehensive discussion or comprehensive conclusion. So multiple choice questions can also be used to assess critical thinking skills and analysis. And for example, the English class might ask students to analyze and characters' motivations in a novel, right? So higher order thinking skills, it could really bring students into the world of analysis. So each alternatives will really showcase in whatever difficulties or errors the student are most likely to commit, which can be easy for the teacher to analyze or to realize if what grounds is he or she lacking in terms of his or her teaching. So such as this example, 9/12 minus 2/4 is equals to blank. So the first choice is the letter A, 7/8, which is wrong or which is not correct because there might be error in getting difference in both numerator and denominator. While letter C, 4/12, there might be error in terms of changing dissimilar fractions to similar ones. And for the letter D, the 6/12, still an error because there might be something wrong in getting the difference between similar fractions. And the correct letter is letter B, which is the 3/12. It's the correct option. So all of those instructors and alternatives are not just labeled as wrong or errors. They have corresponding meanings on why they are errors. And that can be justified by the teacher if he or she really planned his or her test. So, in identifying the purpose of tests, the learners spend enormous time reviewing, recalling, or relearning their past lessons prior to testing. So, after testing, they could realize if whatever the mistakes they have gotten into and to modify or alter them to restudy, relearn, or review. So their test motivation is contingent on the stake they put on testing. So to either just pass the test, pass the course, or to get high grades. So it can actually lead to motivation or demotivation. So it depends, but it is the role of the teacher to really engage the students in the level of excellence. So not just to let them pass the test, but really to make them understand that acceleration or to accelerate is what we needed to attain. So many teachers conveniently use testing as their sole means to arrive at objective measures for evaluating students' performance and later for communicating grades to stakeholders. That is the very purpose of our placement assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments, and interim assessments to place the students in whatever grounds though they really belong, to sustain their needs or to sustain their difficulties, to give them proper feedbacking as per formative assessment, and to map up or to sum up their overall achievement out of instruction on the summative test and to supplement them with more knowledge that they really needed.
So now we are in the specifying the learning outcomes, which belongs to the planning phase. So under the planning phase is the specific learning outcomes. So learning outcomes describe the measurable skills, the abilities, the knowledge or values that students should be able to demonstrate as a result of a completing course. So assessment has changed considerably as advances occur in field of educational and cognitive psychology, particularly in defining learning and its domains. So as you can observe in the curriculum, there are a lot of adjustments, there are a lot of modifications because the administration wanted to specify or they are specifying or they are pointing out learning outcomes that will best fit to our students' needs. That is why the DepEd provides milks or the most essential learning competencies which serve as a guide on what portion should be holistically given to our students. Learning is more than acquiring declarative language or declarative knowledge rather, meaning it is not just about knowing facts or it is not just about informations or acquiring informations about a topic, but instead it should be applied in ourselves, application. It must be utilized in different situations, like real life applications. It does not only revolve in knowing or understanding concepts. Is it clear? So the efforts of the curriculum makers have seriously defined or even specifying learning standards in terms of outcomes that tells what learners should know and for them to be able to establish an increasing level of cognition. So from lowest there should be changes or improvements from lowest to higher cognitive level, so or to have attained another level of cognition that will ease their learning. Therefore, if we will be able to specify the learning outcomes, we will then have a control or a source on what specific content and nature or task to be given towards the student. So assessment then becomes a quality assurance tool for making students progress in attaining curriculum standards in terms of content and performance. So understanding requires rich disciplinary specific applications of knowledge, like explaining, modeling, and interpreting of data. Meaning, the processes for assessment recognize and address different learning targets defined by the intended outcomes from knowledge of facts and information covered by the curriculum at every level to various facets or showing understanding of them, like what operative process or skills they can demonstrate, what bigger or it used to measure or it used to determine what bigger or newer ideas they can form and derive, the innovative products and processes they can create, including their authentic application in real life. Of course, there should be always an um, realistic approaches. There should always be a relevance in realistic situations. So in every learning that you are instilling towards your student, there must be an integration. Okay, I just like what I have mentioned earlier, there must be an integration or application of different strategies and application of realistic approaches. So they are considered as learning targets that are suggested by the level of learning outcomes target. Again, again, by specifying the learning outcomes, we will be able to have an accurate basis or guide in teaching. So there will be no struggles, there will be no difficulty in identifying the learning outcomes. It is if it is specified and planned correctly. So to continue, from the standards or move from the standards, which are descriptions of the scientific ideas, to an articulation of the knowledge and skills students should demonstrate. So there should be a demonstration of the acquired learning. Demonstration must always occur in the teaching learning process, of course. As mentioned previously, the learning outcomes provides progress from lowest cognitive level to the highest level attainable for the grade, meaning there should be a presence or a sense of improvement on the acquisition of learning. So there is a progress. As the focus of assessment varies due to the recognized levels of learning, so do the method. So we will use, because there are varying levels of learning of students. There are slow learners, fast learners. So you should do the methods of or techniques for assessment. So differentiate instructions. You can use also the differentiate instructions. So the demonstration of scientific ideas comes smoothly, or it will result smoothly. Each learning outcome, when properly stated, defines the behavior or task to be performed within a given content area. How to elicit this behavior through testing is part of the construction planning phase. So finally, make explicit what students should learn and to be able to do. So finally, make explicit what students should learn and able to do. Note that it's really important that the classroom test must be carefully planned to make sure that it is valid and reliable, so that it can justify about what are intended to be measured. So of course, in constructing or in crafting a test, it should be planned ahead of time. It should consider what are the needs of the students. does it intend to assess among the students? So you might ask this question if you will come to create a test in classroom. So does it intend to assess amount of the student learning at the end of the instruction or period? Or is it a week, it is the somewhat review of the week lessons or a unit lessons? Is it a quarter or semester or at the end of the course? So this type of test is post-instructional assessment, which means tool expected to cover the curriculum standards of a subject or course. So grade or year level in terms of measurable and demonstrable students outcome. I'm so sorry. As important as this, two elements purposes is utilizing the test as a means to inform. So as the learning outcomes is a means to inform the learners how they are learning and how they are progressing. So it is important to note that we will specify or specifying terms into specifying the learning outcomes.
And now we are down to preparing the tests. So, for our intended learning outcomes, it is a statement of specifying what the learners will know and be able to do at the end of the course, or simply our learning objectives. And then down to the learning activities, and it is the teaching and learning methods which the teachers use to achieve each of the learning outcomes, and the students will know exactly why they are asked to engage in a certain teaching and learning activities in their courses, or this is the instruction itself. The instruction itself, wherein we needed the proper connection or the proper communication of the students to avoid them with confusion and demotivation, to make them understand if what is the purpose of this instruction, what is the purpose of this discussion, and also to apply the critical pedagogy to really relate it with the real life situation or the existential theory. And next, after the instruction is of course the assessment. No, it is an ongoing process that aims at improving students' learning by measuring the learning outcomes they have achieved, and feedback will be given so that the students know what they need to do in order to get better grades. So once again, to not just to pass but to excel. So that is why we have this rediscussing and rediscussing, reteaching, and retesting. So out of all three, the intended learning outcomes, the learning activities, and the assessment are comprised of the learning experience of the student, and it is creating learning experience for the learners is the center of OBE. And in other words, students should be placed first in our design of the learning outcomes, assessment tasks, and learning activities. So the learning experience of the students depends on what we invigorate to them, depends on what we introduce to them. And it is vital, it is our vital role and crucial initiative to provide them with the learning they really deserve. So for preparing a test blueprint, whatever the purpose, whatever the purpose of the test may be, a teacher must determine appropriately the learning outcomes to be assessed and how they will be assessed, the what and the why. So the learning outcomes to be assessed, I mean, whatever the grade level the teacher is being assigned to or has thought of, he or she needed to emphasize the importance of concluding using the learning outcomes or the learning objectives. So in short, he or she needed that certain goal, and that is out of the curriculum being administered by either of his or her school or university. So the planning phase can make deep trilogy among curriculum instruction and assessment. And curriculum should be inclined with the assessment strategy. So in preparing a test blueprint, to assure the preparation of a good test, a test blueprint is commonly set up in a two-way table of specification. There are actually different types of tables of specification, and we will dig into that later on. So that basically spells out the what, will be tested, or the content and the subject matter, and the how it will be tested to obtain the information needed. The how is what types or methods of testing are we going to use. So test blueprints will show us that the test will cover all the important learning objectives in different curriculums. So it also shows that the test will use a variety of test items types to assess the student learning. And test blueprint are an important tool for ensuring the tests are fair, comprehensive, and aligned with the curriculum. And they can also be used to develop test items that are consistent of difficulty level and accuracy level. And we needed to make sure that the test blueprint is aligned with the curriculum and the learning objectives of the course. Now, the what covers the two aspects, which is once again the content area or the subject matter being covered and the target learning outcomes. And these two aspects should sample the intended curriculum. And for the how, it specifies the test format and the type of assessment questions or task to be used and the item distribution to attain an effective and balanced sampling of skills to be tested, or any usage of or any choice of the educator to use in terms of testing. It's either multiple choice, true or false, or any other type of methods he or she will be using depending on his or her choice. Now we are down to a simple one-way table of specification for a language test. It is called a one-way grid, showing a plan for testing different learning outcomes within the same topic area. So one way table of specification is often used for skill-oriented subjects like language and reading, or for classroom formative tests focusing on specific skills. So we have here the objectives or the skills and the number of items or points. So first is to identify the statement with errors in verb use. We have 10 points. It is as per content of the test paper, no? So first is to identify the statement with errors and verb use is 10 points. And then next, second is to supply the correct verb forms in a paragraph is 10 points. And when you require them to prepare a news article reporting a past school activity, it is 20 points, a larger point because it needs more time and lots of ideas. So we have a total items or total points of 40 points. So this table of specification typically include the following information: um, content areas, learning objectives, test items, and number of items. It depends on you, but this our example is the main guide in making the table of specification, where in the content areas, the different topics or subject areas that will be covered on the test, which is included on your chapter discussion. And then for the learning objectives, the specific skills of the students that you wanted to develop or to demonstrate on, or you wanted them to demonstrate on the test. And then the test items types, either multiple choice, true or false, short answers, essays, and the number of items with its corresponding points. And the tables of specification are used by teachers and students and our test developers and curriculum planners to ensure that the tests are aligned once again with the curriculum, learning objectives to learning outcomes, and they are being assessed properly, and they can also be reliable and consistent in terms of difficulty and accuracy level. So for effective and balanced sampling of skills, what students should know is equals to the length of the test, and the learner's outcomes requires more items in order for them to analyze more or to use higher thinking or the higher order thinking skills. And the admirable test items in every learning outcome is of 10 items. And if there are is 5 items, I mean. If there is a large scope or learning you wanted them to integrate, then you can administer a test with at least 10 items target. And if there are lots of targets that you wanted to obtain, you can add up to 10 points. And that is for 80% correct items is already acceptable for mastery criterion. But I guess it 75% is acceptable.
Another table of specification is given in the reference, or it is the sample two-way table of specification. So this time, both elements are shown. For example, the what, the subject matter, or the subject matter and skills were given, and how means on the type of test format on how the test should be administered. So this instantaneous a two-way grade or three-way grade depending on the elements displayed. In the column 1 shows the topic or content. So in the column 1, here is the content, the verb usage in the look at in the table, the verb usage and the communicative writing. In the table 2, the target instruction outcomes or the skills and column. So the target outcomes or skills are the following. First is one, they identify the statements with error in verb use. Number two, supply the correct verb formations in a paragraph. And the second part, in the letter B, the outcome skill given is to prepare a news article reporting a past school activity, for a past school activity rather. So in the column 3, the item format recommended for you. So the item format either be objective, given in the reference, it's either be objective or performance. So for the test or item format, two general types can be utilized. So the objective and performance. Objective tests and non-objective or performance task. They are called objective items. So kani siya kabalo familiar naman kita no kung unsa ning objective items because they have a single right or best answer for every item based on a key to correction prepared in advance. They require the learners to either supply a missing fact or select one correct response from a set of alternatives. Performance tests, on the other hand, requires learners to construct or create responses, either be written or oral. Example, to write a letter or to write an essays. Or in performance tasks, example are the design and experiments or experimentation. So those are example of performance tasks which requires demonstration or demonstrating their skills. They are also referred to as non-objective items since scoring relies on dili siya man nato makonsider kuan kanang non-objective items since kay na siya gina-follow ang performance test kay na siya or performance assessment kay na siya gina-follow nga guidelines or rubrics or criteria. So para masabtan jud or nasalay standard for scoring prepared ahead. So a classroom test consists of purely or of objective items, but inclusion of performance tasks provides a better profile of the learner's ability across instructional outcomes. So it is very important that as future educators, we are considering or we are using the differentiated instructions because not all learners really learn the same with other classmates in the class. So it is better to use objective performance, objective and performance assessment. Then the outcomes 1 and 2 call for the application of rules in the use of verbs. So there is outcome number 1 kay it call up sa outcome number 1, it calls for the application of rules and the use of verbs. O, di ba? Identify the statements with error in verbs. So they will recall the rules, they will apply the rules. Then although the term identified is used in outcome 1, it goes beyond just knowing or recalling the rule. The learners identify the statements with erroneous application of a rule. So dito sa first outcomes kay ang within mga activity katong nay mga error bitaw sa kuan din ilang i-correct tagaan nila so pa nilang sakto nga verb. Then outcome 2 is more direct in applying the rule. The rule as the learner has to supply the correct verb forms and stimulus material like a paragraph. So outcome 3 demands a higher level of cognition. Of course, it also demands time because it is time consuming, especially in preparation rather, as it requires the integration of different skills, verb usage, the vocabulary, the organization, and the mechanics. So to produce a news article. So it is one of the example of two-way table of specifications. We also have the number of items. So we should specify. So in the verb use, in the first outcome or skill, which is to identify the statements with error in verb use, it has two items, then followed by two items in the article writing or article reporting. It has 20 items. So overall, total items in your table of specifications or in your task is 40 items.
Now we are down to an expanded table of specification. This expanded table of specification is way more traditional than one way or two way, no? And one way or two way table of specification, and it provide a more specific guidance for test developers and teachers. And for example, an expanded table of specification can be used to ensure that the test includes a variety of cognitive levels, such as the example being provided, and difficulty levels and stimulus types. So cognitive levels for okay, I'll explain it later. So it can also be used to ensure that the test items are aligned with specific keywords or phrases in the curriculum or in the chapter. So the keywords, the important notes that they needed to remember are being included in in this expanded table of specification for reference purposes. So we have here the subject area, outcome or skills, and then the objective, which includes the alternate form and the gap filling, and as per performance is the product assessment. So first, letter A is the verb usage. First, they needed to identify the statements with error in verb use. So it is administered, or they are required to answer it in a alternate form, which has 10 items equivalent to 25%. And to supply, second is supply the correct verb formation in a paragraph, is they need to answer it in a gap filling type of test, which has 10 items and an equivalent of 25%. And next is for the letter B of the subject area is communicative writing. For the outcome skills is they needed to prepare a news article reporting a past school activity, and it is performance based, a product assessment, 20 items equivalent to 50%. So with a total items of 40 equivalent to 100%. The rubrics for grammatical accuracy is 10 points and clarity of message is 10 points and can be used to evaluate the article. So as per cognitive levels, difficulty levels, and stimulus levels, we can actually correlate that with we can actually correlate the cognitive level into the alternate form, the difficulty level into, I mean, the cognitive level into the gap filling, since the outcome number two is supplying the gap or answering the blanks. And then for the difficulty level is the alternate form, because they are being provided with two options which they needed to analyze if what is the correct answer. And next is for the stimulus type is the product assessment or the performance based.
So we also have a table of specifications in mathematics. So here, planning a test blueprint for a long test like a final examination may be presented by showing the different units of studies, the different competencies given in the table, the comprehending or with concepts or apply. Next is applying or the computation and analysis or problem solving. So by showing the different units of study that are meant to develop similar cognition outcomes as given in the is given in the table. So though there are different competencies, but it usually it points out one specific learning, which is to learn the solving the mathematic expression and different mathematic expressions. So each unit may be intended to develop a common set of skills like conceptual understanding, computational skills, and problem solving in mathematics. Items for the first two outcomes can be measured using objective items, while problem solving can either be objective or non-objective, depending on how it is designed to be scored. So, the first two competencies, which is the comprehending concepts and applying computation, it is best if it is an objective type of test. Then the analysis or the problem solving, well, it is obviously it could be subjective type of item. So items for the first two outcomes can be measured using objective items, while solving can be either subjective objective or non-objective. A problem-solving item as an analysis task requires the learners to provide both the solution and the correct answers may be given more than 1 point. So, obviously, ang problem-solving kay time-consuming siya. As what you observe in the points conversion or kuan the total item, though ang total item sa problem solving kay 15, but ang kana siya gibutangan na siya tag 3 points mo na nga 45 items ang 45% sa overall items ang kaning sa problem solving. Kay nga naman mas bugat ug mas lisod ang problem solving, so mo nang kinahanglan nga napud siya additional points or advanced points ay kaysa sa comprehending concepts o kaning applying computation. Kay murag basic siya di para sa problem solving nga it requires time, it consumes effort, so kinahanglan nga mas bugat pud ang points nga ihatag diha nga portion. Thus, thus 15 problems can either be 45 points if 3 points are given for each. For example, the 2 points for the solution or process and 1 point for the correct answer. So this, klaro naman siya, no? So this TOS or this table of specification variant illustrates the logic of giving a graded value to a higher cognitive outcome level. Example, analyzing as more cognitively demanding than applying. So, of course, like just like what I have said earlier, the problem solving is more cognitively taxing. So kanang lisod-lisod man ang problem solving. So ang logic diha kinahanglan pud kung unsa tong mas lisod-lisod mao putoy tagaan nimo dakog points. Maskin paggamay ra siya og items kay imo man pong i-consider ang kalisod sa items. So kinahanglan na balance nga dili siya ingon balance but sakto nga paghatag og points or pag-weight sa duha ka or sa tulo ka competencies. So clarity and specificity of the test blueprint in terms of what to test, the instructional content, and the cognitive ability or behavior serve as primary evidences of the content validity of a teacher-made test. The final version of the test should mirror the test blueprint as prepared. Of course, kung unsang nasa yung table specifications, mao sa dapat ang pagkasunod-sunod, mao ang construction, maong number of items nga imong ihatag para sa students para sa ilang quiz. So this will serve as your evidences and will make your content valid to administer. So that is the table of specifications in mathematics. I hope you have understand the table specification in mathematics, but don't worry because if there are still queries, we can answer it by simply chatting it in the GC so that you will be informed about the exact information that you needed. So that would be all for the table of specifications in mathematics. Thank you.
Now we are down to the last table of specification, and it is the table of specification for a mastery test and subject verb agreement. So it covers a wider domain by Miller, Lin, and Gronold 2009. So this table of specification for mastery test and subject verb agreement is sort of way more specific, just like the mathematics table of specification. So this table of specification for mastery on subject verb agreement would identify the specific knowledge and skills that the students need to have in order to be successful on the tests. So it would also specify the types of test items that will be used to assess each skill and number of items for each skill. So this table of specification shows that the test will cover all of the important learning, like all from the smallest to the largest details, and objectives related to subject verb agreement. And it also shows the test will use a variety of test items to assess student learning. So as per example, we have here the subject type and the instructional objectives covering the use of verb forms with singular subjects and the use as for instructional objectives, we have here covering the use correct verb forms with singular subject and use correct verb forms with plural subjects and the number of items. So for the first person subject, it is one of the categories of the lesson. So first person, as per the singular subject, is 5 points, and as per the verb forms with plural subjects is another 5 points. So a total number of 10 points. And then for the second person subject, verb forms with singular subject is 5 points, and then verb forms with plural subjects is another 5 points, a total of 10 points. And for the third person subjects is along with the verb forms with singular subjects is 5 points, and verb forms with plural subjects is another 5 points, equivalent to another 10 points. And total items for the singular subject is 15 points, and the total items for the plural subjects is another 15 points, a total of 30 points. So those are the number of items that will be assessed or will be administered to the students in terms of the different categories of teaching. So the teachers can easily detect the areas of learners gained mastery and where they needed more instruction. So the difficulty, the promotion, the recognition, and the satisfaction of their learning needs. And then we could also easily draft if what mastery have they already gone through and what difficulties are they still experiencing. So however, by this table of specification, to guide the development of a mastery test and subject verb agreement, the teachers can ensure that this test is fair, comprehensive, and aligned with the curriculum. Since it is a test blueprint, it is a guide. It is a guide for the teachers to not cross or not come along with confusions in terms of administering the test and using other references or not correlating with the learning outcomes. And it is also important to be mindful with the time constraints involved. As we administer the test, we needed to give the students enough time to analyze and to answer the test questions we have prepared for them, and to make sure that we have a reasonable length of time for the students to answer those test questions, to avoid pressure, to avoid anxieties. And finally, it is important to communicate to students the test format and the reasons behind every action that the teachers is going to do in order for the students to feel the transparency in learning and in education. And this will help reduce the anxiety and reduce the students from feeling the exclusivity, yet feel the inclusivity and the diversity of a classroom setting, the inclusivity and the diversity of education, and for them to not be pressured with our expectations. So that is all. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you learned something. Goodbye.